You are now tuned in to Hot Topics with Donna. And on this show, we do one thing: keep it real hot. That's honest, open, and transparent. If you didn't know, now you know. So sit back and unwind as we bring the vibe and a little bit of glorious sunshine to your heart, soul, and mind. Your lovely host, Hot Donna, will be with you in just a few moments. But while you wait, go ahead and set an atmosphere of peace in your space. If you can, cut the lights down low, get your hydration on, vibrations on. Cause tonight, you're about to receive some delicious food for your soul. Are you ready? Are you ready? It's about to get You are indeed in the one and only place to be this evening. We appreciate you for joining us, and in just a few moments, we about to turn the heat all the way up. That's right. It's about to go down right now on Hot Topics with Donna. Show your virtual love by smashing that thumbs up and heart icon as many times as you can. And without further ado, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing your host, the one and only Hot Donna.
Hello, my friends. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Hot Topics with Donna. I am your host, Donna Taylor, and HOT stands for honest, open, and transparent. Hey Tanika, thanks for joining. We're gonna get right into it because I see my guest is already on. I am so excited. This lovely lady, she is family to me, but so I'm excited. The word that I chose for her, because like I tell you guys, every week that I come on, whenever the Holy Spirit gives me a word for my particular guest, that's what I share. And it's not only for my guests, it's for you all too. And so the word that I chose for her tonight and you all is wholeness. And I always give you a scripture that it comes from. So the word wholeness comes from Psalms 147:3, and it said, He heals the wounds of every shattered heart. And so once we divulge into conversations, then you'll understand why I chose this word for my particular guest, and not only for her, but as for me as well. So I'm going to go ahead and send her an invite so we can get into our conversation. So just hold on. Okay, I have sent her the invite, and soon as she accepts the invite, we will start. So I'm truly excited. I hope you guys are ready for your Thanksgiving break. I start mine tomorrow, and I am so excited. Maybe we all can recharge and get through this last month before the new year come in. Tanesha, it should be, if you're on your phone, it should be a green icon at the bottom of your screen, and all you have to do is click that, and then it will allow you to join my live. Yep, and here she is. So I am so excited about Thanksgiving break. I get to sleep in, be lazy, and do nothing. Nothing. Gonna be, hey, beautiful.
Hello.
Are you good? You driving?
No, I'm at home.
Oh, okay. Welcome. So I know the word that I chose for you tonight was wholeness.
Okay.
And so you have been through a lot of things and stuff. And so, I when I chose this word for you, because you and I have been through the same thing, different situations. And so wholeness is a big thing. And so at this point in your life, what has kept you whole, or how did you become whole again?
Um, what has kept me whole, Donna, has really been having a strong support system from my
Hmm.
family and from my friends, and most of all, my prayer life, my
Right,
personal walk and relationship with God.
right, right.
Because if it hadn't been for any of those factors, I don't know if I would be sitting here talking with you today.
Right. And so I want to start off with that first, because then I want our transition to end, because, but you lost your husband as well. And how old were you when you lost your husband? And how long
Oh,
well, first of all, let people know who you are and where you're from first.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Donna. It is an honor to be here with you
Thank
on
you
your
for
show
sharing.
this evening. As you said earlier, we're like family.
Yes,
You
yes,
know that my best friend in the whole wide world,
yes,
since we started high school together,
yes, yes,
that's how we got connected.
yes.
And so I'm originally from Sanford, born and raised. Really, it's a little small town outside of Sanford, but I moved to Sanford when I was about
Hmm.
9 or 10 years old.
Okay.
And I currently reside in Atlanta. I've been here in Atlanta now almost 10 years. It seemed like it has not been that long, but I've been here for a long time.
Do you ever
So
think
Atlanta's second
it's
home.
yes, yes.
Yes. And I am a licensed coach.
Hmm.
I specialize in the areas of helping other women recover who have lost their spouse or going through any type of loss, career, business development.
Hmm.
I recently became certified as a domestic violence advocate with the professional role that I do here
Hmm.
in Georgia, and I'm also an author. I've been blessed to write a couple of books, and I guess that means a little something. So that's a little bit about me.
But you know what? That's amazing. And and especially, we get it when you come from a small area where we're at. And then when you see people doing amazing things that's coming from a small area, because you know how it is. Most people, Sanford is on, we're like big time now with crime going up and everything. When we were once a small town, everybody, we had crime, but it seemed like I always tell mama it's like another little New York, because
Yes.
the crime rate is so high. But
Yes.
when you have family and friends and people that comes from this small town and doing amazing things, that's when you know what? There's still some good stock,
Oh
coming
yeah.
from Sanford and the surrounding areas in Sanford.
Yes.
And so, did you leave Sanford to go to Atlanta with your late husband?
I did.
Okay.
His dream was to be in Atlanta. He was an
Mm-hmm.
attorney and he
Okay.
wanted to start business here. He loved the area. I never had any plans in being in Atlanta. Atlanta used to be the place where you just come and hang out, party,
Right, right,
and then you go back home.
right,
And
right.
so that was his vision and his dream. And that's how I came to Atlanta.
And so, was it hard for you leaving Sanford? Being a small town. Because I know you travel, but to actually leave and then say, "Hey, this is where I'm gonna be," big city and all.
It was an adjustment at first, dealing with the homesickness because when I graduated from high school, I went to college in Durham, but that's not far,
Right,
about
right,
45
right,
minutes.
right.
And so when I left and moved to another state, that's when it resonated. I was like, oh, wait a minute, my mom and family, they are not right down the street anymore.
Right,
You got to
right.
get in a plane or you got
Yep.
to be ready for that 5 hour drive.
Yes, yes. And so once you all settled there, how was it for you and him? You know, because did he have family in Atlanta, or is just because I had written down that he was born in Maryland, a part of Maryland, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then they moved to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's
So he
correct.
was already used to the city, if you will. But he said in your thing I was reading, he left at a young age.
Yes, so he was born in Baltimore, and then they
Right,
moved to North Carolina to Sanford, when he was still
right.
young. So he and his siblings, his family, they've been there in North Carolina. And whenever he decided that he wanted to be in Atlanta, that was around 2010.
Okay.
And at that point, he transitioned here. And then once we became engaged, that's when I moved here to
Okay.
Atlanta with him. And he has family that was here. And of course, again, Atlanta is one of those places that we all travel to. So you
Yeah.
already feel like you got family friends
Right.
anyway.
Right.
So he already had those folks here.
And then, so how soon once you moved to Atlanta did y'all get married?
We were married about 6 months, probably about 6 months after me moving here. We had a private ceremony back at our hometown.
Okay.
His dad married us, and
Okay.
because what we wanted to invest those dollars into living and those things that were important. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, I wasn't really interested in having like a big wedding, to
Yeah.
each his own. But we were kind of more forward thinking. It's like, the money that we would spend on a wedding, we could really put this
Yeah.
towards something that is just as meaningful, if not more. So
And
we took the private route.
and just like when me and my late husband got married, because this was my second marriage. In my first marriage, I didn't have like a wedding. We just went to South Carolina, whatever. But even in that, we decided like how much we was going to spend on this wedding, and we had a budget because we was like, this is going to include everything. And we, made the decision not to have a honeymoon because I was like, I don't want to be wedding poor when I come back and we're married and we're still paying on the wedding. I was like, I
Absolutely.
don't want to, and so we were able to save and go on a honeymoon like that first year of our anniversary, and we were still able to live, and like you said, to each his own. But it didn't make sense to be wedding poor. You had this nice wedding, and then now when everything is over, you're thinking, okay, well, how are we gonna pay this bill? So,
That's right.
and then he was sick from a child.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there have been a couple of times he was in remission,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so when you and him got together, was he in remission?
Yes, well, his journey and is outlined in the book. So he
Mhm.
had a childhood cancer
Right, right,
that
yeah.
he recovered from, um, because I think that was around the age of 8 years
Yes,
old for him.
yeah. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so from that time, he was fine. His diagnoses didn't resurface until in his late 20s.
Wow.
And it's not believed to have been an extension of the childhood cancer. It's just
Hmm.
something, and it could have been. No, the medical
Right,
world
right,
didn't
right.
know.
Right.
But he was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 28.
Wow.
28.
And what was it called? What did they call it when? Because I was like, I never heard it's called, I can't pronounce it, the Burkitt leukemia. I never heard of that. Is that, so is leukemia, do they have different forms and different, or is that leukemia is just leukemia, or do you have a different variation of this disease?
Absolutely. When he was younger, he had Burkitt's lymphoma, which is a very
Right,
rare cancer. It was more of
right,
a growth. Um,
right.
and then in his adulthood, he was diagnosed with acute leukemia, which is a
Okay,
blood disease. And leukemias are staged differently. You can have
okay.
chronic, you have acute, but they're all forms of leukemia is a blood cancer. It
Right, right.
impacts the blood cells. So that's what he had as an adult.
And so because how old were you guys when you got married?
I'm 3.5 years older than him. So We got married, sheesh, I was probably 34,
Hmm. And
and he
so,
was,
knowing that he has this cancer, did at any point did you kind of say, well, there's a chance he wouldn't be here? Did that ever make you not want to take this journey with him, knowing that, he could pass away?
mhm. Not at all. Because the thing with Joe and I, we developed a friendship. We became the
Right,
best of friends. And
right,
so it was a blessing for me to be there with him, to be able to
hmm,
support him. And
right,
when he was blessed to go into remission,
hmm,
we knew even before then that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together.
right,
Because having that time with the person, walking alongside with them, being there
yeah,
with them,
hmm,
it's a bond like no other. And
yeah,
so not being together was not an option, even though it was scary, even though there were times
yeah,
where it was unpredictable. We really didn't know
hmm,
what to
hmm,
anticipate. We just knew that we wanted to do it together.
yeah. And that's like, when JT started, when he first got cancer the first time, I I didn't want anything to do with it. I knew, that he had it, but for me it was more or less a denial, because I'm thinking, because when you hear cancer, you already know in your head you're thinking death sentence.
Yes.
And so I was like, and our families are believers, and I was like, okay, well, God got it, and
Yes.
I didn't want, I totally didn't want anything to do with that. And then round two, I was like, okay, my walk with Christ was a little closer, but not that close, and I started going. But by the third time, like you said, it's a closeness, because you feel like, okay, so this truly may be to death do you part. So
Yes.
you have to relearn how to think, how to love, because your love have to be different, if that makes sense. It have to be different, because it's like you're trying to get everything in, because you
Yes.
don't know when it's gonna happen. Did you ever feel that way? Like when you went to treatments and stuff, like you had to just get everything in to make sure they knew.
We definitely made sure that we enjoyed every last bit of our time together.
Yes.
For me, I try not to think too much about what the potential end could be in a
Mhm.
negative way.
All
And
right.
we really moved forward as though we were anticipating and expecting him to make it and to
Mhm.
live a long life.
Right.
And that actually worked in our favor, because even the thought of, an untimely demise is very
Mhm.
stressful.
Yes.
And we didn't want to place our energy there. We had enough that we had to be stressed about. So we
Right.
put
Right.
our focus on healing, recovery, and
Mhm.
having the best time that we could,
Right.
considering the circumstances.
And you did all this with his practice and everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of times people would see us and like they had no idea what we were
Yeah.
contending with.
Right.
There was a point of time during his treatment where he didn't look sick.
Right. Right.
He was healthy and well and moving forward. And so most of the time people didn't even know what was going on. We were just making it do what it do.
And so, like, when did he start transitioning, or when did it start? When did you guys know that this wasn't looking good for you all?
It was in, hmm, it was around late 2014 where we started having more complications related to
Mhm.
the treatment.
Right.
And with blood cancers, one of the key things that goes on is they're always going to be examining and checking the bone marrow to
Right.
see if those cells have crowded out that in the bone marrow. And so
Mhm.
Right when it was time to go in for kind of like his last appointment to kind of get that clean bill of health,
Right,
the
right.
medical team, identified some concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it made clear that he had relapsed. His cancer was returning. And so after sitting down with the medical team and having a couple of conversations about what
Right.
treatment options were available.
Mm-hmm.
They were very transparent,
Oh, yeah.
because he had already completed the best form of treatment for that type
Mm-hmm.
of cancer there
Right.
was. And
Right.
so going back and reintroducing it again, the chances
Mm-hmm.
were it was much slimmer in
Right.
terms of being able to get like a full remission.
Mm-hmm.
And so we explored a bone marrow transplant. Unfortunately, with African Americans,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have a lot of donors
Wow.
in the bone marrow
Mm-hmm.
transplant community. And,
Right.
and of course, that is a need, but it was hard finding a match. Long
Mm-hmm.
story short, whenever he started dealing with more of the pain associated
Yes.
with the cancer, we started having more admissions into the hospital
Mm-hmm.
for pain management,
Right. Right.
just different things that
Mm-hmm.
we saw the tide kind of turning. But
Mm-hmm.
in all honesty, because Joe was such a fighter and because he was such a
Right.
warrior, we
Right.
still did not. I'm gonna just be honest. We were really kind of surprised, even seeing how um, his condition had kind of declined over
Mm-hmm.
time, because we
Mm-hmm.
saw that before and we saw
Right.
him
Right.
pull through.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so it was kind of around that time where it's like, okay, well, it's a possibility, but we were still holding on. We held out to the very end.
Right. And so, was he at home when he passed, or was he in the hospital?
He was in the hospital. Yep, he was in the hospital. We were blessed to have his immediate family there
Mm-hmm.
with him.
Mm-hmm.
I had my family there, so we were surrounded with so much love and support. And he was able to, just go and transition peacefully.
So when you and him both knew that this was going to be it, what was the conversation like for you and him as husband and wife?
hmm That conversation, we were both we were both hilarious. He, again, all the way to the end, one of the things that we talked about was my career path and what
Right.
he envisioned for me. And he used to tell me, and he even said during that time, he was like, T, you need to make sure that you are connecting with this industry and this industry,
Right.
because you're
Right.
good.
Right.
Because I was already doing professional coaching, with my
Mhm.
staff when I was at the organization I was working with. And
Right.
so he believed so much in me. And, of course, we had to have those hard conversations as far as like what the next steps were with business. Because
Mm-hmm.
we had started building a life. And so we
Yeah.
did have to
Yeah.
have those conversations about who
Mhm.
was going to do what, who was going to be appointed to what, and who. So yeah, we had to have that. And most of all was, Tanesha, live your life.
Yeah.
Like live your life.
Yeah. And um, and that just goes to show you that Joe and JT had the same desire, because um when we had to have those hard talks, and those talks are difficult,
Yes.
and even though we knew, he was going to be with the Lord, we knew, that he was ready, but for him, he worried about me.
Yes.
Because he was ready, and he said whenever he comes, I'm going to be ready. But when he used to sit and he cried, but it was because he was worried, like, okay, is she going to be good?
Yeah.
And he had conversations with people that I didn't even know until after he passed, about things he wanted me to do.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and then the last time we sat and we had a glass of wine, because I was drinking some wine, and he looked at me and he said, oh wow, he was like, I would like to have a drink because I saw him deteriorate and you
Yeah.
can't do anything. It's like this person that you love, the body is totally shutting down. And I used to cry like on my way to work. I would never try to cry in front of him, but I would cry
Hmm.
on my way to work or cry when I'm going somewhere. Did you ever have those moments where you just like, you try to be strong, but when I get in that car and nobody's there and I'm just crying, bawling, and then when I get to work, I'm like, you know, I'm good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You
It
know,
is kind of it was part of the, it came with the territory. That was part of
yeah.
the, especially when you have to, face people and you
Yeah.
have a job and responsibilities to do. So I had a lot of car sessions, and as you said, I never wanted to cry or break down in front of him because I know that he was relying on my strength to help him
Exactly.
pull through. And so that's where that support system for me came in really handy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I do, some regrets that I have is the fact that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't utilize that support system even more, because sometimes, I would feel like, oh, I don't want to burden anyone,
Yeah.
with this. And sometimes you don't even know what to say, and you just didn't know how to,
Yeah. Or
access your
even you
support
feel
system.
like, right, or you feel like people think, oh, she's strong because people be like, oh, you're strong, and JT's be like, yeah, she's strong. But I'm thinking, I don't always want to be strong. I'm not always strong, and then he always told me at the last days, he said, do you?
Yeah.
And he said, if I die tonight, and he said, if you met someone tomorrow,
Hmm.
he said, live your life, and he said, and don't allow people to make you feel bad. Because he
Absolutely.
said, I'm no longer here to give you what you need.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if you got married, he said, you would have my blessing. And that speak volume about the men that we had,
Yes.
knowing that they're leaving their wives
That's
for
right.
someone else to enjoy,
Hmm.
to just reap the benefits of such beautiful people,
Yes.
as you and I. And and sometimes, and I don't know, did you ever feel guilty when you even thought about dating? Did you feel like you were like, I won't say letting him down, but it was almost like a betrayal.
Hmm.
Does that make it's
Oh
like,
yeah. Yeah.
I
You
mean,
definitely.
they're not here, but it almost feel like, well, why should I be dating? But it felt like a betrayal. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's a normal feeling. It was hard for me to get back into the dating scene because it just it
Weird.
felt like it was betraying him.
Yes,
It felt
yes,
like betrayal, and I
yes,
needed time to work through my own
yes.
fears around
Mm-hmm.
recommitting,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that life happens, and
Yes.
your partner, that's the closest person
Yeah.
that gets to us, even more so than a parent, because we share an intimate space with them.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
I had to heal from that space in my life where
Mm-hmm.
it was being fearful to
Right.
connect and have love again because I was afraid of
Yeah.
losing that person.
Mm-hmm. And then, did you also feel like, I never once compared, people to him, but it's almost like, will they be able to love me with all of my shortcomings, all of my faults, even my nasty attitude when I have one?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And and that's how I think because our partners, I mean, when you act crazy, your late husband probably like, well, it's one of those days, and and just go on. But then when you meet new people, you're thinking, when do I allow myself to just be who I am, and they're either gonna take it or leave it.
Yeah. And one of the things that I had to remind myself, and I think I'm so thankful that God blessed me to have a great man in Joe. And when you marry someone of that on that level, they set the bar really high.
Yes. Yes.
And a lot of that was because of just who he was as a man, who he was as an individual.
Right.
And so one of the things that I had to remind myself, and I even have to share with, if I meet a man who's interested in pursuing something, and they learn about, me being a widow, and then they may ask like, oh, okay, what was your life like and how did y'all do? And so I have to remind myself and remind them, I'm not comparing you to him.
Right. Right.
Everybody has their own lane, because that would be unfair.
Exactly.
They have to come in on their own, in their own way. And I've had to have that conversation. Like, I'm not looking to replace him. No one could ever replace him.
No.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't even be fair to them, because they should want you to build something new.
Yes.
But so once this transition, and he's gone on, how were you the first week after? Because for me, I was totally lost. I was like, because I was with him for 30 years, and I'm thinking like, wow, like, dude, like, this is for real,
Yeah.
So how did you handle that, just the first week alone?
Oh, wow. So the first week alone, what I did is I made sure that I was with immediate family and loved ones, because I was afraid to be alone. Everything felt so, it was so bizarre. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. I was just in a daze, because I didn't really get a chance to fully start the grieving process, because after, we funeralized him, it was time for me to come back to Georgia and take care of the business side of things. We had, staff, employees, different things so I had to really put those things to the side, so that I could take care of those things that was important, because there was a lot of critical things that had to be, taken care of. So the first week, the first month, the first year was a blur. I just got through. Thankfully, I knew enough to know that I needed to be under therapeutic care. So I was working with my therapist, and, taking those necessary steps towards the healing, because I wasn't all the way together. And I didn't, I didn't want to be alone. I didn't feel like I would harm myself, but, it was those times where you felt like you just were not going to make it.
Right. I get it. And, and like you said, your support system, like my support system was off the chain, amazing. And then, to have my boys come and step up like they did, it helped. And, and when it was time for them to leave, they knew they could leave me because I had a great support system, because they knew that my friends, when one was here, when one left, and all of them had gotten so good that they coordinated their schedule. So when one was leaving, one was already here, and then there were days that when they called me, I didn't answer. And they were texting me like, and I just didn't have it in me. And then they realized that they had to kind of step back to allow me to grieve, because if they were always there, then I would start to depend on them and not allow myself to grieve and have that time.
Absolutely.
And I appreciated that in them, because like I knew, I was like, they have their own life,
Yeah.
And then unlike you, I ate at night. That was, I had chips, I had soda. I just had food just on my nightstand, because that was like my comfort, because you go from being with someone 30 years, sleeping in the same bed, even if there's no intimacy, even though you can put your feet over there and that they're there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you do that and you're like, wow.
Yeah. It's a huge adjustment. I never thought that, that would be my experience, but here we are.
Here we are.
And every day, one of the things that his mother used to say, and I loved it, was one moment at a time. You know, sometimes people say, oh, one day at a time.
Yeah.
It was
Oh.
one moment for me.
Mhm.
It was one moment, because at any given time you could be in a completely different space emotionally,
Mhm.
and you had to deal with it when it came, at whatever time it came.
And like for me, did this happen like when it came as months started coming? I I got anxious every time his death date came. I got so anxious that I had to learn how to control it, because it's like you're just going about your day, but then it's like in your mind it's like a clock, and it automatically says, oh, it's getting close. And I would just get so anxious. How did you deal with that?
Whew. Um, I again, therapy in my support system, because um, for a while, even with my and I'm very transparent as far as like, being with a therapist. I was diagnosed with
Right.
PTSD.
Hmm.
But I refused any kind of like medication,
Right,
and
right,
that
right,
because it wasn't for me.
right.
Coupled with, again, my faith,
Hmm.
my support system, I
Hmm.
got through it. Sometimes medication therapy is beneficial, is
Right.
helpful, needed, but for me, I didn't. I just had to go through it. Whenever I would hear certain sounds or be in certain places, it would sometimes I would get sick or nauseous, because it
Right.
was I couldn't take the same path to get to certain locations, because it would remind me,
Hmm.
of a point in
Hmm.
time during that, treatment. So I had to make a lot of adjustments. I relocated from the
Okay.
home that we were in.
Yeah,
Um,
I,
yeah.
I, but what I did do, I, all the furniture that we had when he was here, I totally turned it into just my stuff, my own personal stuff. And like, we took so many pictures, I had to put some of those away, because when I came in, it was just too much for me. Like you said, you look at this picture and you say, oh wow, we was there, or we were
Hmm.
here. And Mama asked me the other couple of weeks ago, she was like, you gonna get you some furniture in here? No, because I only have two little nice little leather chairs, and I'm like, when my friends come over, we chill. We can sit on the floor, we can hang out. But I had to make it my own personal space. I had to know when I came through that door, I wasn't bombarded with all these memories of him. Not saying that they go away. It's just that I
Right.
needed something to look different for me.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
she was like, "You gonna get you some furniture?" No, honey, I ain't getting no furniture. We just gonna sit here. We just gonna do that. But now that you're here, and it's been what, 5, 6 years now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how are you? Because I see you doing your thing. So we're gonna talk about some more stuff. But you are really doing your thing, and the beauty of it is, even though we went through all of this, it's just amazing how God kept our minds, because if we didn't have him, we would probably be on somebody's serious drugs,
Yep.
or our parents would be taking care of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm gonna tell you, if I couldn't have gotten through this without Christ,
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
know I couldn't have. And like for me, he was in hospice, and I literally slept in the bed with him 3 days,
Yeah.
knowing that
Hmm.
he's got, knowing that if I doze off, when I wake up, he might, not be
Hmm.
there. And so I know that God prepared me, just like you, that I would be able to minister to some other widow,
Yes.
to say, hey, it's going to be rough, but you can make it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You can't pacify and say, oh, well, girl, because I even reach out to you one time, like, hey, how do you? And
Yeah.
sometimes, it's almost 2 years, and sometimes I still find myself in a good mood going to work, and then all of a sudden the
Hmm.
tears just, And I'll call my girlfriend. I'm crying. She was like, "Wait, what happened?" I was like, "Nothing happened. I just don't know. I can't explain how I feel. All I know is right now I'm a wreck.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
That's a real feeling.
Yeah, and then and she'll talk me through, and she'll always remind me there's going to be certain things that's going to trigger your mood. And sometimes you don't know that it has triggered you, but you know it has when you're feeling this way. And so
Absolutely.
now, like for me, getting through the holidays, because we're used to a certain tradition,
Hmm.
now you have to start your own.
Yeah,
You know, when I want to call him because I'm excited about something, and then I'm like, I can't.
yeah, absolutely.
And so I just know that he's looking down and saying, I'm proud of her. She's
Yes.
pushing, she's pushing through. And that's what keeps me going because just like you, like your late husband, JT always asked me, when are you going to start ministry? He was like,
Wow.
when I hear you, he's like, I would love to hear you preach before I die.
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah, oh, well, oh, my lights went out. And I'm like, oh, okay. But do you know, I just did my second sermon Sunday.
Congratulations. That is
I
awesome.
did. Hold on, I'm trying to give me some light. I think my
Okay.
computer's died. But yeah, but I did. And so with that, I got sad because I'm like, he's not here to see it.
Yeah.
He's not here to see it. But am I too dark for you? Am I really
It's
dark?
I can see you, but it's you can tell that the light has gone out.
Okay, well, keep talking, guys. Just start talking about your coaching stuff. I'm just going to try to get me some light in here.
Absolutely. So as I shared earlier, I was coaching from a professional in the professional workforce, probably probably at least 13 years of my professional career. And then once I realized that was the direction that I wanted to go in, I enrolled in school to
Right,
become a licensed coach. And at that time, I specialized specifically in business and career development, and life coaching as a catch-all came with,
right.
a lot of different things. And so one of the things, once I kind of launched my coaching practice, I used to have to turn clients away because I used to have to always make sure that people understood the distinction between coaching and therapy. And
Right.
so I was a former clinician when I was back in North Carolina, but I was no longer practicing as a clinician. So I used to have to tell people the difference between coaching and getting therapy. And there would be times after, kind of doing like an assessment or
Mhm.
consultation, I would make a referral for them to, go to a therapist, especially, women who were coming in and wanting to kind of get past, those certain things in their life. And we just, identified that therapy was the best, option at that time. So that's how I got into the coaching arena.
And so I saw on your website, y'all website looked nice, by the way. And
Thank
I
you.
saw that you have Nicole, your best friend, my cousin, and
Yes.
then you have Jacob on your team.
Yes.
So do y'all still work closely together, with and you offer all these services, get clear professional consultant, get your business affair order, get your love life and language together. And I found that one interesting. Is this one particularly talking about your love language, like teaching people how to know what their love language is?
Hmm. And also helping people understand that the love language is not limited to those five, because
Right,
everybody's
right.
love language is different, and we can have several. We can have them all at one time. It doesn't matter. So helping people and helping couples understand the beauty. And when we talk about love language, because those books make it sound real good, but and I know it's all
Yes.
well and good when things are good. But what happens when that love language changes?
Girl, but do you find this like in your marriage, like for JT, all the time his was physical touch. I don't care. I mean, and when I say physical touch, guys, it's not all about intimacy.
Right.
If he could touch me, he was satisfied. If I'm sitting in the room with him and I'm thinking I need to be doing something else, but he was good with that. And for me, mine were words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to know that you appreciate what I'm doing. You know, and people
Absolutely.
think, well, that's what a wife does. But yeah, that's what we do. But when we can hear those words and say, hey, I really appreciate, you know, how you iron my clothes today, or whatever the case may be. But my least one is receiving gifts.
Okay.
That is my least one because I'm not that type of a person. You know, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy, but my quality time is my all. That's my all of them in one.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
I realize for me, when I get that quality time, you're gonna get the best out of me.
That's
You're
right.
gonna get the best out of me because I'm gonna be able to be vulnerable with you. I'm gonna be able to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly side of me when
Mm-hmm.
you spend this quality time with me. So when you learn this about me, then you'll know how to handle me accordingly, and then you'll know how to love me.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
you don't know how to
Absolutely.
love me because if you buy me all these diamonds and stuff, and I'm just like, okay, yep, put them in a box, and
Yeah.
then you can feel like I'm really great. And
Right.
when I saw that, I was like, that's amazing because you know it's sad that a lot of people don't know their love language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They
They
don't.
and my husband, my late husband, didn't know his.
Really.
I bought the book because when I saw it and I was like, okay, because when we were going through some trials and stuff in our marriage, I was like, okay, I need to do whatever I have to do to cultivate this marriage so we can stay married. So I had to like kind of reinvent the wheel, you know, to try
Yeah.
to see, okay, what is our love language? How can we rebuild
Yeah.
to see where we can start over?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
and that's what I did. And so when you do this session, how do people feel when they realize what their love language is?
They a lot of times they walk away kind of relieved, you know, knowing that okay, there is a love language, and
Yes.
helping them again to identify their love language outside of the
Mhm.
standard framework of those five love
Right.
languages.
Right.
Because you know, one of the things that I've realized is that everybody's idea of love and even respect, those things that we think are synonymous to what we believe, it's different for other people. And what may
Yeah.
work for them may not necessarily make any sense to me, but it's not about what makes sense to me because I always tell couples, you got to go home to each other. You don't have to come home to me. And
Right.
so if this is the love language that works for you too,
Mhm.
if it's healthy, if it's not causing harm, regardless
Right.
of how different it may look to me, if it works for them. So I find a lot of times that they have been relieved to know, like, oh, okay, this is us. This is how we interact and exchange with each other.
But do you find, and I don't know I don't know your clientele, is it more African American or, you know, Caucasian, or is it a mixture? And
It really depends. It's almost like there will be times where I will get a lot of women to reach out.
Mhm.
They came across the website or through word of mouth,
Right.
or I was working um, at an event or an organization and providing some type or a speaking engagement, and people will
Mhm.
reach out. So it really, for me, it has depended on the location or how
Okay.
they came into contact with me. But I would say overall, my clientele has been African American women.
And so, do you find, you know, because and when we finish talking about this, this is going to lead us into the domestic violence piece. But do you find that we as African American women, we have been conditioned, if you will, you know, from our grandmothers, you know, be submissive, be submissive, be submissive, you know, and then when we're so busy being submissive, we lose who we are in our spouses or in our boyfriends or whatever. And then when we come of age or start getting into these relationships, do you think that hinders us as women, African American women? Because they always say we're so aggressive, but we're really not aggressive. We're just trying, if you will, trying to find our love language, because we're trying to find where we fit in. We're trying to get you to know, hey, I need you to do this, but I'm coming off to you as I'm being aggressive, but I'm really not. I'm just telling you I need quality time, but I don't know how.
Yeah. I think what has happened, and what has, how can I put it? What has happened is that we've had those conversations about being submissive without context. You're
Right,
submissive to your husband.
right,
The whole dating and getting a boyfriend and all of that, until you are in a space where that person is providing and creating, with you, you
mhm,
all are doing something collectively.
right,
That's when we start talking. But of course, when you grow up in certain religious backgrounds and stuff,
mhm,
that's
mhm.
that is immediately taught. Oh, you got to be submissive to your man. Well, let's make sure we are clear. You are submissive to your husband, and being
Yes,
submissive
yes,
doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean that you're giving everything up or anything
exactly.
like that. And obviously you want to submit to the right person, which
Mhm.
is a whole nother conversation as far as like who are we submitting to.
Right. And do you feel being a life coach and just, now, since you have evolved and, like being a widow and doing life coaches, do you think that life coach should be added to um, counseling? Like when you're getting married, how you have to go, so many sessions to see, to talk to your preacher. When I was thinking, and you said how people sometimes be like, "What is a life coach?" And and you made it clear, like you need a life coach for a gym or a trainer. And I'm thinking, when people get married, they should have a life coach and they should have the pastor in there, because the pastor can tell you the spiritual piece, and then the life coach can teach you, okay, what is your language, what are you looking for? And then I think we will have more marriages that will last,
Mm-hmm.
because it's two vital pieces. So how do you feel with your company, how if you can work that in, with churches? Because I feel it's so important with what you guys are doing, because the preacher can give us a spiritual aspect, but if we don't have anything else, we can read our Bibles. But if people ain't there,
Mm-hmm.
they read it and it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have the two working together and cultivating and say, this is what God say, but how are we going to cultivate you to know each other's language?
Absolutely. I think that that's a beautiful blend. And the thing is, now with coaching, you have a lot of pastors that are going and taking the extra steps and getting trained and
That's
qualified and
awesome.
licensed in terms
Right.
of
That's
coaching.
awesome.
Because one of the things that I share with couples and even individuals, if there is something that, if there is a next step in your relationship,
Mhm.
a next step in your marriage, a goal, something that you're aiming for, things that you want to pursue and achieve, that's where coaching could be ideal at. If there are two individuals, and let's say they are struggling with some weight issues or issues in the bedroom, and
Right.
sometimes they may not feel comfortable talking to their spiritual counselor about that. But
Right.
that's a
Right.
place, that's a good place for coaching to come in, because we're going to help you set goals. We're going to
Right.
push you,
Mm-hmm.
to see, improvement and to see performance in those
Right.
areas,
Right.
whatever it may be, because we're results driven. We want to see the results. Like, we want to see, like,
Exactly.
okay, we started out here 30 days ago,
Right.
and we want to see where you are 60 days from now.
And typically, how long do your clients stay? Does it depend on the situation they're in, or does it depend on where they want to reach, the goals they have set for themselves?
Absolutely. When clients come in, I ask for a 3-month commitment off the top because
Right.
there's not any way that you're going to be able to see results if you just come in for
Mhm.
one time that month. You're not
Right.
going to see, if anything, that's just a consultation. But if
Right.
a true commitment, I ask for 3 months at minimum. And then I've had some clients that have been with me since day one, and then I've
Wow.
had some people, they've come in, that they've gotten what they needed and they've been
Mhm.
good for 6 months. They may check in. I may check in with them periodically just to see how
Right.
things are going. But as you said, it's really dependent upon what their needs are at the time. And of
Mhm.
course, if they're, making progress, then our job has been done.
Right. And so, do you require them to be honest, open, and transparent in order for you to give them what they need?
Oh yeah, they have to be. And of course, it's interesting because what happens, sometimes building that rapport up front, people are they're a little hesitant about sharing too much
Mhm.
because they don't want to be embarrassed. So the first thing is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
making them, feel like, hey, we're
Mhm.
all in this together.
Exactly.
There's probably nothing that someone could share that would shock, surprise me, embarrass me, or anything like that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
making them feel comfortable, but transparency and being honest, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to do the work and get good results.
Right. Right. And so, what made you decide to be a life coach? Was this prior to your late husband, passing, or were you doing that before he passed?
I was doing it before he passed, and it's funny because I remember coaching is the call on my life. Everybody
Right.
has their form of ministry. I always tell my
Mm-hmm.
family and friends, ministry goes far beyond the pulpit. It goes far beyond the church,
Mm-hmm.
and that is coaching for me is a form of ministry. I went back and pulled some notes that I was with one of my cousins. This is I know I was either a senior in high school
Right.
or a freshman in college. And
Right.
I was sitting down with her. She's older than me. And I started doing like a self-improvement plan with her.
Wow.
And we laugh about it now because it's like, girl, you were coaching then. So this was in me.
Yes.
It just took me getting to the place to know that, hey, there is a place for what I do.
Right. Right. And and that's just like, with me, I always minister to my friends, and because I am a people person, me, I'm just a people person.
Yes.
I always like people to feel comfortable being who they are,
Yes.
because I know what it's like when you don't love yourself and how people make you feel like you're not here, you can't do the in crowd. So, and when I started really loving who I was, then I was able to be like, girl, God, you better, get yourself together. And so, and that's why he should always say, when you're gonna minister. But like for me, my ministry, I really didn't care if it was behind the pulpit.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
and it's funny because how he's giving me my messages is just like you and I talking. So when I
Mm-hmm.
give it to the people, it's just like you and I talking, so they can understand. Because I told him, I said, I don't know this Bible, like everybody else, but I did tell him I'll go do and say what you want me to say, but you teach me. And so that's what he's doing.
Absolutely.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And like I said, and yesterday was one of those moments when I cried because I my girlfriend, she came and she picked me up, and in the side of her door she had his obituary, because
Okay.
I just did like little cards. And I said, wow. I said, here he is,
Yeah.
I said, and now here I am
Yeah.
going in here and give the word. And I said, the Lord knew that that's what I needed to know, that I'm doing what he saw in me. And like I told my mom, he saw it in me before I saw it in myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like yesterday, that was just like confirmation, because I looked and there it was.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow. And so, and when I went in, I had notes, everything, but God didn't even allow me to use my notes. It just came from where he wanted it to come from, and
That's
so,
awesome.
and so that's why, I said, when people look at life coach, because I have other friends that's life coach, and I hear people say, what are they doing? Because it's almost like you have a stigma, like what life can they, what can they tell you? But when you don't really understand the depths of what they're doing, you can't make a accusation like a life coach. What is a life coach? You know, but when people sit down, because people are trusting you, because if you really want to know the truth, we can call pastors life coaches,
Yeah.
but because he's a man of the cloth or a woman of the cloth, we want to trust them.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. Because I just keep it real, because that's if to me that's the same difference, and that's why I said, why can't the life coach and the pastors build the same pace? Because both of you are coaching people and guiding people to great lives,
Absolutely.
to make a change.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so do you work out of your home, or do you have an office that you have in Atlanta?
I started out in an office, but after a while, with overhead, it wasn't necessary. For
Right,
coaching, the beauty and coaching, we were virtual long before pandemic. The
right,
same way
right,
that you and I are interacting, most of my
right,
coaching sessions are via Zoom, or
right.
if they desire to meet, in person,
Mhm.
I have, locations and things of that nature where we
Okay.
can meet. But most coaching goes forward virtually.
Right, right, right. Hey,
Hmm.
Shirley, thank you guys for tuning in. And so, when do so Nicole's role is, what is her role as, because I know she's an attorney, but what is her role as the image consultant?
We've had clients that they don't necessarily fall in the traditional role of, like, sitting down coaching one-on-one. That's on the
Hmm.
business side, when we have people that are coming in, launching and starting their business, where they may be
Okay.
the face for their company. And
Right.
so whenever we are branding and imaging, we want to, talk to the client about their look.
Oh,
What does that look when they are facing the public?
mhm. Right, right.
We've had, different clients that have come in. They want to they want a makeover in terms of, like, okay, I'm starting this new business. I want a
Hmm.
new look. And
Hmm.
so sitting down, doing some of those things, what
Right,
style
right.
works best for you and the industry that you're going into?
Because you guys had your own boutique. Do you still have that?
No, we haven't done anything with Hello Bliss. Believe it or not, I have gotten a lot of inquiries about, are we gonna start it back up? I don't know if it will be this year due to this whole thing with the shipping and all of this.
Right,
That has been a nightmare for business
right,
owners. I know several who,
right,
waiting on products and things like that. So
right.
if we get a
Yep.
chance to relaunch Hello Bliss, it will probably be once all of this kind of get back to normal.
Right, right. Because y'all had some really nice stuff, but so what made you guys start that?
That was a vision for both of us. I mean, again, we're family, so
Yeah.
Nicole is extremely fashionable, extremely stylish. The same for me. Even
Yeah.
before, remember back in probably like 2003 or four, we were literally talking about, like, names of,
Right.
that we would come up with, where we were going to name a clothing piece or design
Right. Right.
something.
Right.
And 2017, after all of those years, it was something that came into fruition.
That's awesome. Yeah, because y'all had some nice stuff. Yeah, I still have some
Thank
pieces too.
you.
But yeah, so now that we talked about your being a life coach, you're a domestic violence advocate.
Hmm.
So by being a life coach, how does your life coaching assist you with being a domestic violence advocate?
Teaching resiliency, because when I've had now having the opportunity to speak with victims,
Mm-hmm.
survivors, and, you know, working on this major project here in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we learn, or that I've learned very quickly, this is a form that a victim or a survivor, you know, they are journaling, they are journeying through a significant loss. They are journeying through some very uncertain and unstable times and situations in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, life coaching on that side is about resiliency, supporting and standing for an individual, because there's so many unique things that that goes on in the life of a victim or survivor that, you know, if you've never been through it, people wouldn't understand.
No,
And
they
one of the things that, you know, everybody loves to ask, well, why won't they just leave?
it ain't that easy.
It's not that easy.
Because because like with me, when I was married to my kid's father, you know, he tore me down, and my girlfriend asked the same thing. Well, like, you go back, you stay, you go back, you stay. But when you get tired, then you know you can leave, and then you know that the healing is on the way. But
Yes.
I was reading your thing. You were talking about the domestic violence piece, and congratulations on being in the who's of America.
Thank you.
But I was sad when I read when you was talking about, it says Black women are harmed and impacted by domestic violence at a much higher rate than other race.
Yeah.
And then four black women and girls were murdered per day last year in the US.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I said, when this is happening, we African Americans, families, we lost our way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know, we come from a family and we come from an era when it took a village. I can go to your house and your parents can discipline me. You can come to mine. And parents knew what the kids was doing in the community and in the
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, and nobody got mad when people corrected their children. And then to see this, and that's the first thing that came to my mind. I said, because we as family,
Mm-hmm.
especially Black families, we have lost our way.
Yeah.
Because now our girls, they're getting in relationships, and it starts in school,
Yeah.
starts early. But then we as Black families, we're against each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
against each other. And so I'm like, this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
now you're an advocate. What do you see that you want to change to make a difference to not have these
I
numbers?
want to, my goal, one, you know, as an advocate, is to stand for and support, you know, victims of domestic violence in any way possible. Because, you know, going back to the statement of that we hear often, why doesn't a person
Mhm.
leave? Sometimes leaving can be just as deadly as
Yes,
staying.
yes.
And, you know, women, and when we look at the research, especially with, you know, women of color, primarily African American women, because of the difference in incomes and
Mhm.
salaries,
Right.
sometimes women are forced to stay in relationships for
Mhm.
the financial support because
Yeah.
they have children to
Mhm.
consider. They have to have a roof over their head. And so
Right.
sometimes they have to remain until they are able to do better financially so that they can be independent. So, as an advocate, what I would like to change are those things in general for
Mhm.
women of color, you know,
Right.
improving and closing the income gap when we
Mhm.
start looking at that wealth gap between blacks and non-blacks, but, you
Right.
know, building those bridges to help women of color achieve financial wealth so that they are not feeling forced to stay in
Mhm.
situations or to keep children in those situations that are harmful to them. And ultimately, helping women get out of
Mhm.
those relationships the best way that we can, giving them the tools that they need to be successful so that they can make the choice to leave when it's time.
And then you also said it was 50% of the black women that may be raped and all of these things, and it goes unreported. And so how can we change that? Because it's, I saw a girl on my Facebook, somebody was doing speak out. I guess she was raped in September, and I guess they dismissed the case. She was a young black girl, and I went to her page, and she was talking about it, and it was by a law enforcement person, and I
Yeah.
was like, wow. And I'm thinking, since they dropped her case, that's just kind of like you swept it under the rug. But now these are things that she's going to have to deal with, because now she wants to be heard, but at the same time, they're not doing. That's almost like being unreported.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot goes unreported because women are traumatized, they are
Mm-hmm.
scared, they are embarrassed, they feel ashamed, and they've seen in other cases where they were not believed.
Right,
And
right.
unfortunately, we live in that type of society where even
Mm-hmm.
the systems that have been designed or implemented to supposedly help and serve has really it has caused a lot of women to not trust it because of other situations that we've seen, such as what you just talked about,
Right.
where the evidence is really clear
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and nothing happens. And so sometimes for a lot of women, going through the motions only for nothing to happen, that's just as traumatizing. And a lot of times they just want to forget about it. They want to move on with their lives like it never happened.
And so, what made you want to be a domestic violence advocate?
Well, it's interesting. I when I first started out in my professional career, I was always on the side of helping the offender.
Mm-hmm.
I specialized in mental health and behavioral health as a clinician. And I moved up through leadership. And so when I stepped down out of the traditional work sector a few years back,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get back into it because I know that I had a gift and a ministry
Mm-hmm.
to serve beyond,
Right.
even being an entrepreneur. And
Right.
so I had a couple of folks to reach out to me about this opportunity because it really started out as leading a project, like a program, because that's one of the things that I do well. If they say, hey, we want a program in this community of this
Right.
magnitude, they bring me in to do it. It just so
Right.
happened that this current initiative that I'm on with the district attorney's office
Mm-hmm.
is for victims and survivors of domestic violence. And
Wow.
so once I entered into this role and I really just started, I became a student. I started learning
Mm-hmm.
because I know a lot of survivors of domestic
Right.
violence.
Right.
I've seen it and all of those things, but to actually get into a setting where you start
Mm-hmm.
to learn
Right.
about those underlying things that leads to that, it was a no-brainer for me. It's like, I'm going to be on the side of standing with victims and survivors of domestic
Right.
violence.
And so, do you only deal with the victims? Do you do it branch off for you to deal with the kids? Because I feel they're a victim of domestic violence as well. Even though it may not physically happen to them, but if they're seeing their parent, it could be a man or woman. People always say, "Oh, well, how can a man be in domestic violence?" Well, we have some women that, hey,
Yeah.
can do the same thing that the men do to us. And so when you have kids involved, how does that piece change for you?
Um, it's obviously, very difficult and hard
Hmm.
because, we want to safeguard our kids as much as possible.
Right.
But unfortunately, when we are dealing with domestic violence situations,
Hmm.
kids are caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, what my role and responsibility is to ensure that these families have services in place to make sure that they get whatever help that is needed. And if that service or that help is not available, ensuring that we implement it into the community so that it is available.
Right.
Because ultimately, we know that
Mm-hmm.
kids, when they are product of certain environments, it can go different ways. You have some kids that vow they would never do that or never
Mm-hmm.
be a part of that, and they move on and they go on to do great things. And then you have other kids that internalizes that, and they may ultimately become the abuser themselves or find themselves in abusive situations because that's what was mimicked to them, and they think that this is normal, this is what I grew up in.
Yeah, and do you find, since you've been doing this, do you find that you have more um, kids that grew up in domestic violence, or the person that's been in the relationship, do you find or have you found that they enter these relationships because they think that is normal?
Yeah, most of my interactions and conversations with survivors of
Mm-hmm.
domestic violence, they've oftentimes been able to share, something from their upbringing or
Right.
something in their world that they observed. I've met victims who were pregnant at the time of their abuse, and
Mm-hmm.
their kids were born, and then years later their daughter found themselves in a domestic violence situation. And so there's a lot of interconnectedness when it comes to that.
And do you find that, because I think that especially the school system, because I work in the school system, and I'm at the high school level now, and I see how these guys talk to these girls, and and you look at them and you say, do you think this is okay for him to talk to you like that? Because he may be cool and all this kind of stuff, or just because you want to have somebody. And then, you hear them talking and they be like, girl, you slapped me. They be like, well, it wasn't hard. But then you say, do the parents not understand that their daughters, young daughters, is in a domestic violence situation already before she even graduates from high school?
What I have found, a lot of times some parents really don't know unless there are some obvious
Mm-hmm.
signs of physical abuse. And even then, sometimes our youth and our young people are very careful about how they craft their story. Oh, me and
Mm-hmm.
some of my friends were playing.
Right, right,
And
right.
so what it really requires, and even in all of a parent's best efforts, it can go unnoticed because, we were all younger before. We know how we could, run or thought we were running circles around our parents.
Right,
And so
right.
sometimes parents don't know that this is what's going on with their children.
Right. And do you think that's because, when, our moms were raising us, it wasn't like you're raising, they're the same age. Like now you see mamas and daughters having babies together. And I'm just like, ooh, mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because for me, and I don't know for you, we ain't never see that stuff when we was growing up. We ain't never
No.
seen the mama and the daughter pregnant at the same time. You having baby showers and y'all just like happy. And I'm thinking, okay, now we know that something is really wrong because parents are younger now. you
Yes.
know they're younger now, and so now we have all this stuff, all these traumas that these young girls and young boys are having, and then now one day they're going to have to see you.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have to be a life coach, and you're going to have to be trying to help them with this domestic piece. And so the beauty of being a life coach, even with domestic violence, because sometimes it may be so horrific that you're trying to keep your insides contained because these people are dependent on me. And so now I can show emotions because now I have to figure out a way that I can coach them back to life, if you will.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I would tell anyone, um, prevention is better than trying to intervene. Prevention meaning having conversations with our young girls and our guys very early
Yeah.
on about
Right.
conflict resolution, how you
Mm-hmm.
handle disagreements,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you may have seen at home, that's not the way you do it.
Right.
Prevention is better because what happens a lot of times, what I've seen in domestic violence, and let me be clear, physical abuse is one form, but we also have the verbal abuse, we have the
Yes.
emotional, the
Yes.
psychological abuse.
Yes.
Those forms of abuse, that's just as impactful as
Mm-hmm.
physical
Mm-hmm.
abuse. And so
Mm-hmm.
prevention again is the best method to curbing the cycle of domestic violence, having those conversations whether you see it going on or not. Same way kind of some of our parents had the conversation about the birds and the bees.
Right.
You got to
Right.
have that conversation about, hey, that's not love if somebody's putting their hands on you. That's not love if they're calling you out of your name. So we got to
Exactly.
start those, identifying red flags,
Yes.
identifying
Right.
those things before you get involved. If you see this, if you hear certain buzzwords, if those are things. Prevention is much easier because it's going to be real hard for me to get the attention of a
Mm-hmm.
young girl who's been involved in a relationship with a guy for 3 years, and out of those 3 years he's been beating on her and doing everything else to her. She's become conditioned to that, so she's not really going to be trying to hear me if I'm talking about, hey, you need to leave, this is not healthy. He has reinforced all of those things. So prevention is the key to curbing domestic violence.
And so once we, you say like the buzzwords. So what are buzzwords in the domestic violence world?
Some buzzwords, as far as identifying, like if you meet a guy and
Mm-hmm.
and he gives you warnings like, hey, don't push my buttons, don't
Right.
make me, as though he's warning you, don't make him. It's something that you're
Right.
doing to cause that. And
Right.
that's completely, I can't even find the word for it, but
Right. Right.
that's not conflict
So
resolution.
you should be ready to run because you at this point he's already, if you will, he's pre-warning you and saying, I don't like that, don't push me, because and so you should be thinking, well, if he's saying he don't like that, then if I push a little bit more, what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah.
But do you think women that get into these relationships and they have a guy say that, do you almost feel that they be like, oh well, he loves me, he keeps warning me, because sometimes they think, and it's crazy, but they do, and it's almost like, well, girl, he told me I better not do that because I'm pushing his button. Us, we'll be like, well, if you push his button, what's going to happen? But
Right.
for them, because they may not know who they are or have low self-esteem, they may take it as, oh, he really loves me, you know.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to those love languages, and it just
Mhm.
because to say love, it doesn't make it healthy, it doesn't make it right.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
that, we've heard that often. He beat me because he loved me. That's the way he showed me he loved,
Yeah.
because we've heard that, but we
Yes,
know that that is not
yes.
the functional way of love.
And I don't know how I can say this. I used to always say, because you hear people, and before we really knew what domestic violence, you're like, oh, you just getting beat or whatever. And I can honestly be transparent and say, when you hear people talking and you be like, well, he gave me a black eye, but then he wants to lay down and be intimate with me. And I'm thinking to myself, and even to them, I was like, how crazy can you be? Because like you said, he loved me, but how can you love me looking at me knowing I got a black eye, but you want this other piece of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But now, as you get older, it makes sense because of the state that that woman may be in, that black eye. Yes, I have this black eye, but then they smooth talk, because that's what they do, right? They smooth
Mm-hmm.
talk, and then she's able to lay down and become intimate with this person, knowing that, my eye is swollen. So how you think I'm looking sexy? Because I'm not looking sexy, but because you
Mm-hmm.
tell me you love me, and their favorite word is you made me do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's unfortunately how, you know, people who get caught in domestic violence, that's that cycle,
Mhm.
because you have the abuse that happens, and then the apology, and then the promise that it'll never happen again.
Right.
And, and we've all had those times where it's a relationship we probably should have left, but they promise,
Mhm.
we won't do it again, whatever it may be, whether it's, you know,
Right.
being, unfaithful, whether it's abuse, whatever
Mhm.
it may be. And so, oftentimes you have the person believing that, okay, they won't do it again. They've seen how this
Yeah.
has hurt me. They've seen how this has
Mhm.
damaged me until it happens again.
And out of all of this stuff you're doing, life coaching, your author, what is the most rewarding thing that you have achieved in your life up to this point that you are so thankful for?
The most rewarding thing for me has really truly been my career accomplishments
Mhm.
and being able to be in the game, being able to contribute, um, being able to have established, you know, a pretty decent reputation. Some may disagree, but at
If
the end,
you the who's who, you got it going on. Because if you remember, the who's who's, they did that in high school too, right?
yeah,
Because my oldest son Cedric, he had got a letter, and when he got it, I remember he was in high school. He was like, "How I get this?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "But it's gonna look good when you go to school one day," and that's a big accomplishment because you know your work is speaking for itself.
yes,
And when
absolutely,
your work speaks for itself, that's when you know that you're doing what you are called to do, you know? And
absolutely,
that's just like, even through death, when we still can be at a point, even that little piece of our lives that was taken from us.
yeah,
But it's still amazing how he just poured and he poured and he poured, you know?
absolutely,
And then the
absolutely,
more we pour, the more we grow. And it doesn't mean that we don't hurt.
yes,
It just means that he is keeping his promises and saying he's going to pour back into us because he needed them, even though we wanted to keep them.
yes.
But he has poured, and I'm so thankful because I be looking, I be like, yeah, she's doing her thing. And for me, I just like looking to see, like, what outfit she gonna have on? Because we all have our different styles, because like now, I used to like the same thing Mama used to like, and so now she be like showing me stuff. I'd be like, no, I don't like that. I'm like, no, I don't like that because I find myself I'm in between, kind of like I'm really into like matching clothes that people like that. Why you what that you got on this and that? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And so and that's where I'm at now. I'm just like I have my own style, and when my person, that I'm dating now, he always say, "Well, why do you always have to look like you're going to a fashion show or you got to?" I'm like, this is who I am. This is who I am. I know how to dress down. And, it's kind of hard because I am at a high school. So I'm trying to learn how to work flats. But, me and flats don't do too good.
absolutely.
you know.
I tell, people again, we're family, and people do not understand that fashion is really, to me, it's like a part of your DNA.
Yes.
It's in your DNA.
Yes.
And, and that has always been you since day one, since I, first met
But
you,
look
have
at
started coming
my aunt
around.
and mama, like
Hmm.
Nicole, we all came from just, we love clothes. And it wasn't that we were trying to impress nobody. That's just, like you said, it's in our DNA. Because
Yeah.
I remember me and my cousin Brenda, when we was in middle school and they have a dance, my mom and my aunt Jobelle, they used to have to go get us an outfit for the dance, every dance. And people used to be like, y'all going to get an outfit? Yes. We had an outfit every time we went to the school dance because that's just who we were.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
and now we're still like that. We're still like that. And so how does your family feel with all the accomplishments, seeing you from being in a broken state to now in a place of healing? And I'm sure, just like me, and I probably will be still in a place of healing until the day we die.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So how has your transition with them been for them to see you, because we were broken?
Absolutely. I believe that my family is proud of me. I think that they look up to me.
Okay.
Um, and I'm so honored by that because they reach out and they encourage me. They check in to see what's going on with me. And I also
Right.
love that I'm able to, be a blessing to them. I'm able to
Mhm.
use, those different things in my life to help them grow,
Right.
as individuals. I have family members that are launching their own business. I have family members that, go through difficult and challenging times. And,
Right. Right.
sometimes it's good to be able to have someone that can help them along the way. So I would say that my family is very proud of me.
Yeah. And so where do you see yourself next year?
Oh my God, next year I see myself on an island in Barbados vacationing for 6 months while it's cold here, and I'll be over there when it's warm. I'll be somewhere and still being able to positively impact the lives of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to be international. I want to be able to share my journey, anywhere with anyone who it
Right.
could be a blessing to.
Right. So, your book is out, and I plan on ordering it because I read the first chapter of the book. Um, that's amazing how you still made his memory still alive.
Yes.
And I know, in the chapter you talked about, how the journey was hard because these are memories you had to stir up, if you will, and put it on paper. And and because I'm doing my memoir, and the title is Imperfect Marriage Saved by Grace. And so in there is some hard truths, that when people read it, they might be like, well, why she want people to know that? That's just who we were. We wasn't this, perfect couple that y'all always seen, like we're laughing and we had it all together. No, we didn't have it all together because if truth be told, there was times when we wanted to be done.
Absolutely.
We wanted to be
Absolutely.
done. But God just didn't see it that way because he knew that we needed each other to the end. You
Absolutely.
see? And so just putting those words on paper, because it sometimes you look and be like, dang, did I really go through this? Or did we really do this? And people think it's a place of like exposing, but it's a place of letting people know this is some real stuff. When you look at me, a small town girl like you from Sanford, North Carolina, this was real life. When
Absolutely.
you see, like, and I'm quite sure when people see you and your husband out, they be like, wow, they got it going on. But they don't realize that even in the midst of having it going on, there were some dark days.
Absolutely.
And I think when we, especially being married, are not afraid to say, sometimes we just miss the mark. Sometimes we don't always have it together. And when we can allow our family to know, hey, sometimes we don't have this all together.
Yep.
You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
Even with you being a life coach, sometimes you just didn't have it all together. Sometimes you may not even have the answers for your own self.
That's right.
You know,
That's
and
exactly right.
so and I know when you put these words on the paper, it had to stir up a lot of emotions, you know, from happy to sad to like, wow, this is
Mm-hmm.
this is really our life. This is really who he was.
Absolutely.
I know he's looking down and saying, she did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you fulfilled something that he wanted, but time just wouldn't allow him to do it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's the amazing part because I know it couldn't have been easy. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, you really and truly had to go back to some memories from all these years you and him talked about to get all this on paper.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was that was a process.
Hmm.
He started, and because he had already it had already been prophesied that he was going to author a book about his life. And
Right.
anyone that knew him and had met Joe, he was very reserved, very quiet into himself, but he was a man of a lot of words and a lot of things,
Right. Right.
internally, that he wanted to share with the world to
Hmm.
impact the
Hmm.
world. And as you
Right.
said, it's easy for people to see you on the side of success and think that, oh, you've always had it together,
Yes.
but it ain't
Yes.
always like that. And that's, for me, that's where healing for me has always been able to take place, is whenever I've been able to see the real of a situation. It's good when you can see us on this side when we're doing
Yeah.
well, we
Yeah.
look good,
Yeah.
money's good and all of that stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
But if you're not willing to be transparent and tell people the other
For real.
part to it, how do people grow? How do people recognize that, you know
Yeah.
what, I can get through this too? So there were a
Mhm.
lot of uncomfortable places in Joe's book, things that he had written out, things that he had recorded and shared.
Mhm.
There are a
Mhm.
lot of things that some were may not have agreed with or may not have been well received, but the
But
story is the story.
that's his truth.
Absolutely.
That's his truth. And like I said, when you know, I'm on my last chapter, and for me,
Congratulations.
the last chapter for me is like the closing,
Yeah.
the true last chapter.
Yeah.
You know, and yesterday during the service, you know, I was prophesied that God said, now I can love. I'm free to,
Mm,
you see?
yeah.
And so that's, and you know, and I could have been finished, but I knew in writing this last chapter, this was truly the last chapter.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So when you was finished the book, how was it for you?
Oh wow. It was a feeling of completeness. um Leading up to it, it was very difficult. It took me a long time to write that, even with having most of the framework and context for
Right,
the book,
right,
based off of what he left behind.
right.
But putting it in order and
Mm-hmm.
adding to, there were times where I'd paused and stopped for 6 months, a year. Like
Wow.
that book has been a long time. Even when I released it, I went back to the publishing company and said, you know what, I'm gonna stop it because maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe this wasn't. So I wrestled. I wrestled with it, and I had been in prayer about, do I
Mm-hmm.
keep the book out there? Do I pull it? Until I had someone to reach out to me in my inbox,
Mm-hmm.
whose husband is currently going through a cancer battle.
Right.
And when she told me that she read the book through its entirety, and she talked
Mm-hmm.
about how much she was blessed from it, I
Right.
felt like that was God confirming that it was okay to keep it there. Because again, you know, there are a lot of uncomfortable things in the book,
Right.
but there's also a lot to be learned. Because the bigger thing is, especially as believers, especially as Christians, sometimes we can be misled. We can think that because we're, saved and Christians and all of that, that we don't go through things and that
Right,
we don't have struggles. And it's like, we would be the first to tell you that that is so not true. You
right,
will wrestle with your faith. You will wrestle with your belief in God. There can be, and it may not be losing a husband. It could be anything that
right.
could really challenge your faith. And
Hmm.
so the book has a serious message about, your faith walk and
Right.
getting through, even if you don't get what you thought you was going to get out of the process.
Right. So when you wrote this book and when you contemplating not you contemplated taking it down, was it because of what you thought his family would think?
It
Because,
was a combination
because
of,
almost like an exposure or almost like you know how we do in our culture. We wanna sweep stuff under the rug and make people think that we have it all together because we don't want to shame our family. So did you ever feel like that, especially with his family? You know what I'm saying? Because I know your family know who you are,
mhm.
but what did you want to take it off partly because of them?
Well, it was a combination of, different things, because once it's out there, it's out there.
Yes.
And, for me, you have to strike the balance of honoring his wishes
Mm-hmm.
and, preserving, whatever, there is to preserve. And I had to go back. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't believe this wasn't a tell-all book. I don't think there was anything
Right.
that was, inflammatory, anything that was
Right.
untrue or
Right.
anything like that.
Right.
Um, but still, nonetheless, this is still someone else's. He wasn't just my husband. He was a son,
Yeah.
he's an uncle, a brother. And
Yes.
so taking those things into account, because some people may feel like, well, I didn't want this part of my life in here, even if it was small. And I don't know one way or the other, but I wrestled with a lot of that because it also exposed things about our marriage.
Right.
The
Right.
spotlight was on me. And I've
Yeah.
had people to call and say, "Oh my God, like what?" So it was a lot of different emotions with that decision, whether to keep it out there or to pull it.
But don't you feel, I don't know if the word validating, and maybe it is validating, but don't you feel validated when you can be honest and open and transparent about your life and excuse me,
Bless you.
and no one can have that hanging over your head, if you will. Because I think when we get so caught up in trying to hide what we don't want people to see, it still get exposed one way or the other. It may not be in a book, but it
Hmm.
still gets exposed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know.
One of the things that for me, um, having this experience of losing, someone so close to me,
Mhm.
um, you really reevaluate life.
Right.
And and everything that we go through is really designed to help someone else along the
Mhm.
way.
Yep.
And sometimes it's not going to be in this perfect bow, because I tell
Mhm.
anybody I can clean up real well. I can stand right in front of you and you'll never know. But what good does that do? Because one of the things that I remember when I was going through everything, um, when Joe and I was going through that walk, I
Mhm.
remember feeling so alone. Even though I had a support system, I
Right.
remember feeling so alone and was looking for anybody. I'm like, is anybody else going through this? Has anybody else dealt with this? And if I could have
Exactly.
picked up a book and read, like, oh my God, like I thought I was the
Mhm.
only one going through this,
Right. Right.
you know?
Right. And I, I probably would feel like you too once I, release it or whatever, but it was our truth. People on the outside, beside my friends, knew our truth because one thing about me, I've always been honest with my friends and them about our truth.
Hmm.
And I remember one day when him and we saved, going to church, love the Lord, but we would get in the car and ride to church and not say two words to each
Hmm. Yeah.
And then we get in church and we're hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. And I looked at him one day and I said, we are living a lie. Not before the people. We're living a lie before God because we're riding to church and we're not saying anything to each other. And then when we get into church, you want to be like, well, honey, you know what we're going to do. And knowing good and doggone well, when we get back in that car, we're going to say each other again.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was my pivoting point when I said, I'm tired of hiding. And so when we had Bible studies and when we had opportunities to talk, we became honest, open, and transparent because I got tired of people thinking that we had it all together.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because we dressed right and all this, you know, and people used to assume because I modeled and I did all this, oh, poor, you know, just, you know, she's doing all this. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But see, nobody looked at him because they thought he was all this. Because he was that quiet man. You knew him. He was out there.
Yes.
But because I was out there and they thought I was out there because I modeled and all this kind of stuff. So now you have a different perspective because you're thinking, well, if she wouldn't be modeling, she wouldn't be doing this, you know, whatever.
Yes.
But everybody knew our truth.
Yeah.
But when you can face your truth, and I tell people all the time, when you can face your truth, you will be delivered. You will be free.
Oh yeah.
And you know, and like you and I talk about, your truth may not be death. Your truth may not be, you know, losing a loved one. Your truth may be you need to be delivered from your past and be able to let all this other stuff go so you can truly be who you want to be.
Yeah.
You need to be
Absolutely.
because if you don't, then you can't love, you can't give to people, not just in a relationship, but friendships.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and so now that your book is out, do you think there'll be a part 2 to your story?
Absolutely. I'm currently in the process of writing the second book to this part of the story from my experience and my perspective, because everything in Not Your Average Joe was truly from him.
Right.
And and of course having to add in here and there, but that was truly again his story. And this is funny because again some people will read this like, now I'm in a different place now, I can be more transparent about me, but
Right.
in that part of it, it's like if it was left up to me, I probably would still have that book sitting in my laptop.
Right. Well, I know he's smiling down and say she did exactly what I needed her to do.
Thank you.
Because now it's allowing you to go on to bigger and better things. But do you think you would ever get married again? Or do you desire to be married again?
If I do, obviously it would need to be the right person.
Right, right.
And I had to redirect that language. I have a good friend of mine here who's a widow also. And, we had those conversations often. It's like, oh, no, I probably won't get married again. She said, no, it's not that you won't get married again. You just want to make sure that you
Yes.
have the right one, because I know what it's like to have a great husband, a
Right,
great
right.
marriage, despite what we had
Exactly.
happen. I know what that feels like. And one of the things that I know is so important, marriage is more than just about the love and all of that, flowery stuff. It's
Yes.
really about having that person on your team that regardless of what happens, they can hold you up and they can hold you down.
Yeah. And not be afraid when the world see you out in the front, but you're really not in the front. You're just in your position, and you need to know that that person that you're with, he understands your position and he understands you guys' position, but he's comfortable, and you will be able to walk in a room and walk into any settings knowing that you have a partner, a mate that I don't care, you can be before 10,000 gorgeous men.
Mm-hmm.
My place is never questioned because I know who she is.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? And then if it was reversed, like your late husband, your positions. And when people say your position, it doesn't mean we're not talking about being submissive. We're talking about you truly know your position. But the thing is, whether you're male or female, you have to know who you are.
Yes, that's right.
You have to know who you are. And just like with JT, he knew who I was. And so when I went to fashion shows and when I did photo shoots, he already knew. He was in the background, but I always knew he was in the background, supporting it.
Yes, absolutely.
So do you look for qualities in a man that's similar to Joe?
Oh, absolutely. Again, someone that is, Joe was extremely balanced, very stable. And that's always been a requirement for me. And, someone who just has their stuff together. They know who they are. They have a purpose. They're operating in that purpose. They know how to move forward. They can build me up when I need to be built up. Having, again, balance. That's really one of those core things that I look for in partnership.
Well, my voice is going.
Okay.
Well, how can I say? You continue to do what you're doing.
Yes.
And allow God to do what he wants to do in your life.
Absolutely.
That's all you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I really thank you for just coming on, taking time to hang out with me.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah.
I thank you so much, Donna, for having me. It's been a blessing to see your growth
Yeah.
since, the passing of your husband. And as you said, we reached out and, had conversations. And so it's truly a blessing to see where you are today, and that you're moving forward and positively impacting the lives of women in our community, near and far. So I just want to tell you how much of an honor it is to be here with you this evening.
Thank you, thank you. I love you.
I love you too.
It's been a good interview. It brings up places that you think you're, good, but it's all good.
Absolutely.
Just like
Absolutely.
at least you know that you're not by yourself and you haven't been by yourself because this is a place that you don't wish on nobody.
Absolutely.
This is a place that you get over one hurdle and then you may have a setback, but you don't fall back. You just have a setback until you can move forward.
Absolutely.
And when
Absolutely.
I see you and I'm like, yep, she got it. And so you inspired me.
Thank you.
I'm freshly in it, if you will.
Yes.
I am freshly in it, but I'm good. I mean, I
Yes.
have a moment, and and it's okay.
Yes.
It's okay, and because I don't ever want people to think that because I moved on that I don't have days because I do.
That's right.
I do. And when you're able to talk to someone that understands, even though the deaths were different, death is death.
Yes.
And you always say you're gonna grow old together, but you don't.
Yeah.
But you just learn to move on and say, hey, I got this.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
know what is one thing that your late husband would tell you, don't settle for in a man.
he his words would be something to the effect, don't settle for no fool. he was Joe was a listen, he was, straight no chaser. He would,
Right.
don't settle for no fools. He would definitely say to make sure that I have the man in my life that can honor
Yeah.
me, that can take care of me, because
Right.
that's what he did, and he would expect nothing less. So I I I don't. It takes a lot to get next to me. The standard is really up there, and that's good because again, that has always been my
Mm-hmm.
expectation. So he would definitely tell me, don't deal with no busters, don't deal with no fools.
Yeah, I think JT would say the same thing because he was straight laced. He
Yeah.
and he was just straight laced, and sometimes I'd be like, God, he's so rude and so hard, but that's who he was,
Yeah.
and I think he would be telling me the same thing, and then he'll be like, "You putting up with that foolishness," because that's who he was, because he know I didn't even put up with his foolishness, and so now, my friends always joke about it. They be like, "Girl, if you get with some people that's crazy, he gonna be like, now why she doing this to me?" And
Right.
but I'm just glad that I'm in this space. I'm glad I'm in this new headspace. Like I said, talking to you, I'm full, but I'm happy.
Absolutely. Same
I'm
here.
happy because when you can see a sister, a family member survive and keep moving, then you say, like you said, when we are honest, open, and transparent, then that gives us hope.
Absolutely.
You say,
Absolutely.
he can do it. I can do it. But my grieving and her grieving is going to look different, but we'll be able to understand. We'll be able to
Absolutely.
understand.
Absolutely.
I hope to see you soon. Are you coming here for Thanksgiving?
Yes, I will be in Carolina for Thanksgiving, God willing.
I will get to see you.
Yes.
'Cause I'm not going anywhere, but yeah,
Okay.
hopefully, because I haven't seen you in, it's been some years.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to reach out to you to see if there's a time that we can connect before I head
Yeah,
back here.
yeah, yes. Galen said, "Oh, great job, ladies." I think that's what he said. I'm having
Thank
him
you.
on tomorrow, but yeah,
Okay.
thank you, fam, for just coming on. Keep doing the good work, and maybe I get a chance to come to the A.
Listen, you always have a home here, so anytime.
I'm not like you. I got to get my travel on now.
Absolutely.
And
Now is the time.
yeah, I mean, I traveled all the time when he was living, and now it's like he's gone, and I'm just sitting.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's time. It's
it's
time.
time.
It's time. But
Absolutely.
I hope I get to see you for Thanksgiving, even if we just have to meet for coffee or whatever, it would be great. But I love you. Thank
Love you
you
too.
for shining. And like I said, just do you unapologetic, because I know you will.
Absolutely. And same to you, Donna. Thank you so, so much.
Well, be safe. Are you driving?
Yeah, I'm going to drive in.
Okay, well, be careful on the highway. And I love you. And thank you for just taking the time to hang out with me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I will
Okay.
talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you guys for tuning in to Hot Topics with Donna. This was an amazing interview. Um, Tanesha, she's a fabulous, phenomenal woman, businesswoman. She's in the A, life coach, author, domestic violence advocate. And guys, if you haven't gained anything from this interview tonight, just learn to be honest, open, and transparent with who you are in whatever stage you're in your life, whatever shortcomings you may have. It's okay. It is totally, totally okay. But just be true to you. Just be true to you, because if you can't be true to who you are, you definitely won't be able to be true to anyone else. And that's a fact. And so, on that note, I will be back tomorrow with my guest, Galen, and he is on here already, just tuning in. But I thank you guys. I love you guys. And I will be back tomorrow at 6:30 with another episode of Hot Topics with Donna. And until then, I love you and have a good night.